To attract other people, the key is to be attractive. We come back to the central theme of all of my lectures. Here's what I start with. The major part of your world starts with you. Mr. Schoaf gave me, in dramatic fashion, one of the major keys that changed my life. Here's what he said. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. That simple statement started to make measurable changes in my life in a fairly short period of time. I had discovered up until age 25, I had worked hard on my job, but not on myself. And that was my reason for lack of progress. Now, when it comes to be a leader, the same thing applies. If you really want to attract attractive people, if you'd like to have people of quality around you, the key is to become a person of quality. Leadership, the ability to attract someone to the gifts and skills, opportunities to be around you as a manager, as a parent. I call leadership the great challenge of the 80s in a wide variety of areas, science and politics, and industry and education, sales, and here's a major one, parents. Sometimes parents don't see themselves as leaders, but it is the greatest chance for influence as a parent. I call leadership the challenge to be something more than mediocre, the step up to the new challenge, the new opportunity. It was said of Abraham Lincoln, he was at his mother's bedside when she died, and her last words were, "Be somebody, Abe." And if that story is true, evidently he took it to heart and proceeded from that moment to become somebody. And that's the key to leadership. Inner inspection of your gifts and your skills, your integrity and your character. The outer look at how you present yourself as you appear. In some of our other lectures, we go through this whole scenario. The inside is important, but also the outside is important. When you meet somebody for the first time, first thing they're going to do is take a look. Now, sure, they're going to listen, but then they're going to take a look. Now, certainly we learn to evaluate people by more than what we see, but at first we're going to take a look. Let me quote you an ancient phrase. It says, people look on the outside, God looks on the inside. Isn't that excellent information? That's excellent information. So that might mean work on the inside for God, work on the outside for people. You say, well, people shouldn't judge you by your appearance. Well, let me give you a clue. They do. They do. You can't deal in shoulds and shouldn'ts. You got to deal in realities. Now, when people get to know you, they'll judge you by more than what they see, but at first, it's all they got to go by is what they see and what they hear. Now, sure, there's more to come, but at first, you got to pass the show up test, the challenge to be somebody. Let me just give you a brief list. Be somebody wise. There's no substitute for smart. Threats don't make up for smart. Right? Volume and shouting doesn't make up for smart. There's no substitute for smart. Be somebody strong. Strength is attractive. And there are many ways to be strong. Decision-making, character, language, right? As well as vitality and health. There's a lot of strengths, and they're all attractive. But let me give you now the refinement of leadership skills. Here it is. Learn to be strong but not rude. This is refinement. These are the extra steps to become a powerful, capable leader with wide range of reach. Some people mistake rudeness for strength. It's not even a good substitute. Next, be kind but not weak. We must not mistake weakness for kindness. Because kindness isn't weak. Kindness is a certain kind of strength. We must be kind enough to tell somebody the truth. We must be kind enough and considerate enough to lay it on the line. We must be kind enough to tell it like it is and not deal in delusions. That's a sense of kindness. Not weakness, but kindness. Next, learn to be bold but not a bully. It does take boldness to win the day, to become a leader. You got to stride out front. You got to be willing to take first arrows. You got to be willing to take first problem, first trouble, leading the way. You must boldly seize the spring Farming is not an easy task. You must press the seeds into the soil. I think all of us would relate farming to hard work. It's hard work. Planting the seed, letting it grow, defending it against all of the encroachments of bugs and weeds. We call it not an easy task, but that's one of the best illustrations I know of life. If you want any value at all come harvest, you gotta press, you gotta be bold, you got to seize it. The high life is not for the timid and the shy. Here's the next one, be humble but not timid. Some people mistake timidity for humility. But humility is a virtue. Timidity is a disease. It's a malady. It's an affliction. Now, it can be cured, but it is a problem. But humility is a almost godlike word, a sense of awe, a sense of wonder, a sense of dimension, a sense of understanding the distance in worth and value, an awareness of the human soul, the spirit, something unique about the human drama versus the rest of life. Humility is a grasp of the distance between us and the stars, and yet having the feeling that we're part of the stars. Next, be thoughtful but not lazy. It's okay to dream, but we must not just become a dreamer. Here's a good refinement. Be proud but not arrogant. It takes pride to win the day. It takes pride in company, philosophy, opportunity. It takes pride in community, school. It takes pride in group, organization. It takes pride in cause and accomplishment. But the key is to be proud without being arrogant. Do you know the worst kind of arrogance? Arrogance from ignorance. It's hardly tolerable, right? Next, deal in realities. Deal in truth. Save yourself the agony. Just accept it like it is. Life is fairly unique. Accept it as unique. Now, best to call it unique. Some people call it tragic, but it's best to call it unique. The black widow spider eats her mate after he's finished his noble task. Now, some people would call that awful. I think it's more important to call it unique. Unique. That's unique. The whole drama of life is unique. Right? The Bible is one of the most fascinating books to read because it is so unique in its presentation. One story says, God and Satan were chatting away one day. Now, see, I wouldn't have thought that. Isn't that unique? And they're chatting away, and looking down on what's going on the earth. Now, see, that's unique. I thought, how often do they get together and chat and talk about all this stuff? I don't know. But the drama of the story is absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's unique. And on this particular occasion, the story says, God got to bragging about one of his favorite people, Job. And he got to saying, Job, he's my favorite friend. Job, he's the greatest, he's the richest, he's the most powerful, and I'm taking good care of my friend Job. And he kept saying, Job. And finally, Satan got it up to here with Job. And he said, yeah, God, Job, your special friend. You've got this wall built around him. I can't get to him in my normal fashion. And God said, well, he's a special friend of mine. Right? We got this thing going. So I'm taking good care of him. Now, this conversation is going on. I find that fascinating. I find it unique. And finally, in the scenario of the story, Satan says to God, I tell you what, God, if you were to take that special wall of protection down from around your special friend, and if you were to let me at him, I promise you in a short period of time, doing my specialty, he will curse you to your face and then die. God said, you're out of your mind. He would never do that. Not my special friend. Satan said, would you like to wager? Wow. Isn't that fascinating? God says, interesting question. I wonder what Job would do. Now, see, Job doesn't know this is going on. Isn't that fascinating? That's a fascinating story. Finally, according to the scenario of the story, unbelievable, God went for the bet. And he had just one requirement. He said, just one thing. Satan said, what's that? God said, well, you can't kill him, because he's my special friend. Satan said, okay, I don't need to kill him, but you just take the wall down, let me do my number, and I promise you he will curse you. God said, no way. Satan said, I will do it. And the bet is on. Isn't that fascinating? That's fascinating. According to the terms of the wager, God did as he was required by the wager, and he took the wall down from around his special friend. And when he did, according to the story, Satan did one of his all-time famous numbers on the man. First, took his family. Second, took his wealth, destroyed him. And blow 3, took his health. That's called triple blow. Your family, your fortune, and your health. In one of the last scenes, Job is sitting on the ashes with everything gone, and he is scraping his sores with a rock. And his wife comes along, and she's observed all of this scenario, God forsaking his special friend Job. And she said to Job, it looks like your friend has forsaken you. Why don't you just curse him and die? Satan said to God, here's where it happens. God says, he hasn't talked yet. Isn't that fascinating? That's fascinating. While they both watch, wondering the outcome of this wager, Job says, from his ashes, never. I will never curse my friend. God said, I knew it. I knew it. And he picks up the bet. 10-1 or whatever it was. I don't know. It doesn't say what the wager was. Isn't that fascinating? Now, the rest of the story says God did make it up to his friend, Job. And when you play these kind of games, you do have to make it up. So let's see, what shall I do? I know what I'll do. I'll just give Job twice of everything he had before. Wow. And Job became, according to history, one of the richest, most powerful men in the known world. But isn't that a fascinating scenario? Don't you find that fascinating? Now, it may be a bit frustrating, but we learn to turn frustration into fascination, right? And you just give up on a lot of this trying to figure it out and say, that's one of those things. It's a fascinating thing. I used to say, liars shouldn't lie. See, we call that wasted energy. Why would you deal in such Mickey Mouse pronouncements, right? Liars are supposed to lie. That's what they're supposed to do. That's why we call them liars. Lie. You wouldn't expect them to do anything else. Lie to say, liars shouldn't lie. We call you naive. And we especially call you naive if it upsets you, instead of finding it fascinating. Right? Somebody cuts you off on the freeway. You go chasing them down the freeway and shaking your fist. Hey, save yourself. They say they shouldn't cut you off on the freeway. Hey, hold on, hold on. That's what they're supposed to do. They're known as cutter-offers on the freeway. And if you say, those people shouldn't cut you off, we call you naive. Come on. Here's some stuff that saved me a lot of agony and a lot of anguish and a lot of sleepless nights I used to go through and pulling my hair and wondering. I gave up on all that when I finally understood the 80-20 rule. Let me give some good clues on the 80-20 rule. As a leader, as a manager, being able to influence other people in this 80-20 group, here are some clues. Learn to spend 80% of your time as a leader with the 20%. For maximum efficiency and productivity, this is part of the key. Since it's going to be 80-20, and there's plenty of examples to show that it's 80-20, not exactly, but fairly close. Ask the minister of the church, who picks up the tab here? And he'll say, probably, 20% of the people pick up 80% of the tab. I mean, this is called one of those things, okay? So what do? Well, you learn to work with it and not try to solve it. It's like trying to solve the seasons. You don't solve the seasons, you learn to work with the seasons. They're all set. And some of these things by history are all set. The key is to learn to work with the way it is set. So part of the key of leadership is learning to spend 80% of your time with the 20% because they're doing the 80%. We would call that good leadership sense. Now you say, well, how do you do that? Let me give you part of the answer in how to do that. Here it is. Spend individual time with the 20% and group time with the 80%. This is part of the answer to leadership skills. However, guess who wants your individual time? The wrong group. But that's what life's all about, right? Accepting this challenge. So now you've got to be what we call clever. And you've got to be, another key word, diplomatic. Diplomacy and strategy are two key words for leadership to understand. Diplomacy and strategy. Here's part of the diplomacy. Mary comes and says, I've got a question. You say, Mary, bring your question Saturday morning. I'm going to meet with everybody, and I'll cover it then. She says, okay. Now, it might not be that easy. But if you start trying to put this in perspective now, groups, you can deal with the 80% by groups, and you can talk to the 20% individual. Now, the pull is in the opposite direction, and it always is. Gravity is the downward pull. Life is the struggle in the opposite direction of gravity. It's downward pull. Life is moving in the opposite direction of the normal negative. Now somebody says, well, I'll just fire the 80%. They're only doing 20% of the business. Well, I wouldn't fool with that. Because after you've fired the 80%, before too long, whoever is left, 20% of them will be doing 80% of the business, and 80% will be doing 20%. All right, this is not something you fire. This is something you learn to work with. The 80-20 rule, very important rule. Now, let me give you some other clues to understanding ratios and numbers, categories in this challenge of leadership. The next subject is called the law of averages. The law of averages. So important to understand the law of averages. The law of averages in a personal sense is very simple. Here's what it says. If you do something often enough, you'll get a ratio of results. It's important for leaders to understand ratios. Because if you're working with people, you got to have some charts. You got to know ratios. You got to be able to evaluate your own performance, their performance. Ratios. What do we mean by ratios? Well, let's say you're in sales, you join a company, and you start representing the product or the service. And you're first getting started, you talk to 10 people. 9 say, no, I wouldn't care for any. 1 says, yes, I'll take some. We call this your opening ratio. Now, 1 out of 10, it all depends on what you're involved with, whether or not that's a good ratio or a poor ratio. You say, well, that's not too good a ratio. Well, it all depends. Okay? But it's your opening ratio. So at first, you don't worry about what the numbers are. At first, you just get some activity going. Now, we call this very simply 1 out of 10. Now, here's what's very exciting about dealing in ratios. Once a ratio starts, it tends to continue. Now, this is some things leadership needs to know so that you're not frustrated. If you talk to 10 people, 1 says yes. If you talk to 10 more, chances excellent, you'll get another one. If you talk to 10 more, chances excellent, you'll get another one. It's uncanny. I don't even know how it works. All I know is it works. There's a lot of things you don't need to know how they work. Just work them. Right? A lot of people are studying the roots. Others are gathering the fruit. I mean, it depends on what end of this you want to get in on. It just works. It's a fascinating subject, the law of averages. Okay? Now, once you know that your ratio pretty well is in there, 1 out of 10, now you can start to compete. It is so important to compete, to test your skill against someone else's skill. What someone else can do is a pretty good insight in if you stretch what you might be able to do. So competition is a very healthy thing. Now, you've got to be very smart here. If you've been with this company, let's say a long time, and you've been there so long, you're so good, you can get 9 out of 10, and I just joined and I can only get 1 out of 10, if we have a 30-day contest as to who can get the most to say yes to our product or service, if we have a 30-day contest, you and me, even though I can only get 1 out of 10, I will win. You say, well, I've been here a long time, I can get 9 out of 10. How could you possibly beat me? It would be very simple. Now, it might not be easy, but it would be very simple. During the 30 days, since I understand now these ratios, During the month, while you talk to 10 and get 9, I will talk to 100 and get 10. So that at the end of 30 days, you got 9, I got 10, I beat you. Isn't that clever? Let me give you a scenario here. If you're bright, what you do if you're new, you make up in numbers what you lack in skill. This is called helping people with the numbers, helping people with ratios. Someone says, well, I can only get 1 out of 10. Say, that's got nothing to do with competition. Now, after 30 days, I may be fairly exhausted. But see, I'm pretty good for a 30-day run. One is I don't sleep much for 30 days. About 4 hours sleep is all I need. For 30 days. Now, I got to back off after 30 days, I'll admit that. But for 30 days, I can go on 4 hours sleep. Now, see, it's hard to beat somebody that won't sleep. How are you going to beat somebody? About 1 hour a day for nutrition. That's all I need. 1 meal a day, 1 hour a day for nutrition. In 30 days, how are you going to beat somebody that won't eat? Won't eat, won't sleep. The answer is, it's hard. It's hard, even if they're new. But if the new person is so clever to make up in numbers what they first lack in skill, I'm telling you, you can compete even though you're new. The key is to be bright enough to understand ratios. Here's the next clue. Ratios can be increased. You talk to 10, get 1, talk to 10, get 1, talk to 10, get 1, talk to 10 more, get 2. Why would about the 4th time you talk to 10, you get 2 instead of 1? You're getting better. Key question, who can get better? Answer, anybody who tries. All you got to do is put together the numbers. Right? Your brain is as good as anybody else's. Your chances are as good. All you got to do is find a way to put out the extraordinary effort to do an ordinary thing extremely well. Ratios. Success is a numbers game. It's important to keep track of your numbers. In baseball, we call it batting average. Whatever you're doing, the key is to keep track of your success and how good you are at whatever. Someone says, well, I'm not very good on the telephone. I'll tell you how you can quickly cure all that, is get on the telephone. I'm telling you, you can get better at anything. All you've got to do is attempt it and try it and start putting a string of numbers together and keeping track and understand your own ratios. I teach a very simple sales course. Let me give it to you in 3 points. Number 1, talk to lots of people every day. It's a simple sales course. Number 1, talk to lots of people. Isn't that simple? It's a numbers game, especially if you're new. And here's what's exciting. There's lots of people. You don't have to worry about people. So just talk to lots of people, even if your presentation is very poor. If you put the numbers together, I'm telling you, something will happen. If your presentation was so poor, you went around every day saying to everybody you could meet, you wouldn't want to buy anything, would you? Sure enough, somebody's going to say, well, maybe I would. What are you selling? I'm telling you, it's just about that simple. If you put the numbers together, if you talk to lots of people every day, 2 things will happen. Number 1, you're bound to make sales. I'm telling you, some people buy for the strangest reasons. Hey, some people buy out of sympathy for the salesperson. I'm telling you, you can find some people that'll buy out of sympathy. They don't want to see your kids starve. I'm telling you, if you'll talk to enough people, some people will buy out of sympathy. So part of success is, look pitiful to enough people, right? I'm telling you, somebody will buy. And why? Why? It's because of ratios. It's because of numbers. Now, you can have a much better presentation than you wouldn't want to buy anything, would you? You can get a little brighter than that. But if you start just that simple, it's simple. Someone says, where do you start? Anywhere. It doesn't matter. If you're in sales, walk outside, find you a rock, throw it up in the air. Wherever the rock comes down, start right there. That's a good place to start. Anywhere. The next person you see, say, sir, you're the first man after the rock. And that'll get a conversation started. I'm telling you. They may back up while they talk, but something will start. And the reason is understanding the numbers. The numbers, you don't have to be so cleverly skillful. All you got to do is be bright enough to understand that numbers can make up for lack of skill to begin with. And if you're in a leadership position to help people, help them with their ratios. Say, John, let's go over these numbers one more time. How many calls? Who did you talk to? Okay. So that's my sales form. It's very simple. Number one, talk to lots of people every day. You're bound to get better. You're bound to find somebody. Number two, be real nice. When the weather isn't, be real nice when people aren't. A big part of presentation is attitude, personality. And third is simple. Give good service. Write all the notes most people don't write. Do all the extra things most people don't do. Call them before they call you. Service leads to multiple sales. If you'll take good care of somebody, they'll open doors you could never open yourself. They'll take you by the hand and share you with people that you never thought you could reach. Service leads to the multiples. That's a simple sales course. But it starts with numbers, understanding ratios.